I've made a video game. It's the juiciest, squishiest, most satisfying game I think I've ever made. And it will pour liquid sugar into your eyeballs while you play it. Or it might not. I don't know. Let's talk game design. Frequent viewers of the channel, and you should be one of them, don't forget to subscribe, might remember me mentioning an LTGD Discord member named Comfy, who went through a phase of trying to make a game with as much juice as he possibly could. Comfy, being highly erratic and full of energy, decided to host a little game jam for our community around the idea of simply making the juiciest thing imaginable. He also set us a theme of no violence. My initial idea was a top-down shooter where you massacre everybody in a building, because you can't have any more violence if everybody is dead. But I didn't do that. Instead, I got the most basic top-down 8-way directional movement possible, and then stopped designing the game altogether. You might be thinking, this is stupid, why would you do that? The game is going to be awful. And you would be wrong. Come with me into the past, to the far-off time of August 2020. Don't worry, we're not going to stay there very long. Nobody wants to repeat that. My very first video was about a little auto runner that I'd made, just to re-familiarise myself with game development after so many years away from it, and it had one of the most basic gameplay loops possible. The reason I bring this up is that teachable moment. Sometimes experimentation in game development is about more than just game development. If you've got an idea that you want to try, or a new way of working, or new software to try out, then the best thing that you can do in my experience is to start a brand new project just to do that thing. Something small, manageable, with very low pressure. Now, because this jam was hosted by a member of my community, I didn't feel a whole lot of pressure to develop the 2021 Game of the Year, which I wouldn't win anyway because I haven't bribed Jeff Keighley enough. What I did want to do was try out the fledgling 3D capabilities and various included effects of the software that I use to develop my games, Construct 3. And now for something completely different. Alright, not really. This is Ray Manta, a top-down twin-stick shooter with a distinctly neon aesthetic and an absolute banger of a backing music track. It's in that sort of Jeff Minter style, and if the name Jeff Minter doesn't mean anything to you, then that means you're probably not old and not from Britain, so congratulations on that. Ray Manta has a lot of juice, but not in the way you might have previously understood it. As far as I can tell, it features absolutely no screen shake or squash and stretch effects. It's also not what you'd describe as squishy, but it's still incredibly satisfying to look at and play, despite not having those generally accepted standard techniques. What Ray Manta does is sensory overload, a once common occurrence from the days of the arcade and early home computer, now lost to the ravages of time in the wake of overcrowded user interface design, hand-holding, and tutorials. But this isn't the video where I rant about how modern gaming has lost sight of the standards of the past like the rambling old man that I am. That's next week. Now, no offense to Rob, the developer of Ray Manta, but there's a good chance that none of you have ever heard of it, so you might be thinking, Zane, you can't just pull up some obscure indie game as an example of your argument and call it a day. First of all, how dare you, I do what I want. But secondly, yes, you have a point. So instead, here's this. This is Geometry Wars. Anyone old enough to have been around when the original Xbox was popular might remember this as a neat little Easter egg in Project Gotham Racing, because it was originally only intended as a pack-in Easter egg unlockable little thing. It's a very basic but therefore very pure game, much like Ray Manta. The point is simply to run through the arcade mode over and over and over again, dying a lot and trying to increase your score. The graphics are functional and stylish, and again, despite having no screen shake and only using squash and stretch for certain enemy types, it's a very juicy game. You might be more familiar with the sequel and arguably the best Geometry Wars game, Retro Evolved 2, which released exclusively on the Xbox Live Arcade and, as far as I know, stayed there forever. This is basically the same, but better. What these games do is sort of what Ray Manta does, but to a lesser extent and with a little more refinement. They meld and blend colours and neon effects in an expert way, and there's a pleasing kind of wavy bulging to the background as you move through it, which gives the games an almost tangible texture, like you're gliding through melted Nutella on toast. And I bring this up because if Ray Manta is too obscure to make the point, then it might interest you to know that Geometry Wars was published by Activision. Yes, that Activision. The ones who release Call of Duty every year and whose CEO might actually allegedly be Satan himself, as AAA as you can get. All of this is to serve the point of how I made this juicy game. The movement is smooth and definitive with a small but noticeable turning arc. There is a veritable cacophony of glowy wobbliness to the level's arena, because I decided to turn up all of Construct 3's built-in layer effects to 11. Remember when I said Ray Manta had an active focus on sensory overload? Believe it or not, that has a positive influence on game design if you do it intentionally. As you can see from the footage, the point of this game I've made is to run around avoiding cubes, while picking up other slightly different cubes as a thirdly even more different cube. With a game like this, or Ray Manta, or Geometry Wars, the more that you can disrupt the player's ability to pay attention, the more challenge you put into the game. The whole point is to display spatial and situational awareness in the arena, so that you can dynamically position yourself moment to moment into an advantageous position. Those were some big words. What it means is, games are harder when you can't see what you're doing. Then there's the music. Discussing the role of music in game design is tricky for me because it means that I have to occasionally shut up. And we all know how much I hate doing that. Worse than that, I have to be careful what I show off, because you never know when YouTube's going to swing its big content ID sledgehammer and smush you in the skull. But we'll roll with it. Here's some footage of Ray Manta with the background music. From that, you hopefully gathered how the dreamy, boppy synthwave track accentuates the neon 80s aesthetic of the graphics to give a more rounded and cohesive feel to the game overall. I would argue that this is an often underrepresented element of game juice, because really, juice boils down to the way that the game makes you feel while you're playing it, and music is one of the best mediums, possibly even the best medium for hooking into someone's mood. Are you ready for me to shut up and give you another example? This is Super Hexagon.
Pentagon. Excellent. Game over.
Wasn't that lovely? Now, Super Hexagon also falls under the bare bones arcade design philosophy that I mentioned earlier, and despite being a game of jagged edges and sudden impact, has no screen shake at all. But you don't imagine anyone's going to accuse it of not being juicy enough. So as part of my alternative arcadey juice approach, I needed some fitting music. Here's where we ended up. It's pretty great, I think. It fits with the tone, and hopefully you can see how it accentuates the aesthetic in the way that I intended it to. Now, when I make these Game Jam games, I don't often tell you to go play them, but for this one I'd be really eager to see how well you all get on. Not because I want you to lavish praise on me about what a wonderfully talented genius I am, because obviously you should be putting that in the comments section of this video instead, but because there's some unique technical things with this one that I want to try out. Time for a teachable moment. Your intended design only works if people get to play it properly. Like I said earlier, I turned a bunch of Construct 3's built-in effects up to 11. I then tested it played great, I uploaded it, submitted it to our little jam page on itch.io, and thought nothing of it. Then Namida, another of our community members, played it, and in a very pleasant and respectful way gave me some very critical feedback. I thought this was a bit weird, but given that I like Namida and his critique seemed to be very eloquent and well thought out, I chalked it up to it just not being his thing. Personal taste and opinion, all fine. I certainly didn't lock myself in the bathroom for 20 minutes eating ice cream and crying in the shower. It later transpired that what Namida had actually played was this. For reasons that we still don't understand, most of the effects, an entire layer, and even the title on the title screen just didn't work. Investigations are ongoing, but it should highlight to you the importance of developer competence alongside your design. Yes, you can be a good game designer, but unless you're working in a team, if people don't get that design because of technical reasons, you've got no one to blame but yourself. And then you go and cry in the bathroom. So please, go download it, give it a try, and let me know what you think. And then if you've liked this video, please like the video you liked, and subscribe for more videos like the video that you liked since you just liked it. And I'll see you the next time I'm thinking, hey, let's talk game design.